Right now, somewhere in your home, a machine is doing something almost everyone misunderstands. You switch on your air conditioner, cool air pours out of the vents, and it feels completely obvious. The machine is making cold, manufacturing it, pumping it into the room. But here's the thing that trips everyone up. Your air conditioner does not make cold air. It can't, because there's no such thing as cold to make. Cold isn't a substance. You can't create it or bottle it or pump it into a room. Cold is simply the absence of heat, fewer jiggling molecules, less energy. So a machine can't add cold to your room because there's no cold to add. What it can do, the only thing physics actually allows, is the opposite. It reaches into your room, grabs the heat that's already there, and carries it outside. Your air conditioner isn't a cold maker. It's a heat mover. And you can prove this to yourself tonight. Walk out to the big box outside while the AC is running and hold your hand up near the top of it. Warm air is blowing out. That warm breeze isn't exhaust and it isn't waste. That is the actual heat that used to be in your living room, collected up, carried outside, and set down in your yard. So over the next few minutes, we're going to follow one packet of heat on its entire journey. Off your couch, through a clever loop of tubing, and out into the summer air. You'll see how a machine pumps heat uphill, why that trick makes it 3 to 4 times cheaper than the little heater in your bathroom, and why this is my favorite part. Your air conditioner, your refrigerator, and the machine that heats homes all winter are secretly the exact same invention. No hype, no doom, just how it works. So, if an air conditioner moves heat instead of making cold, we need one rule about how heat behaves, because that single rule explains the whole machine. Heat always flows in the same direction, from hot things to cold things, never the other way, not on its own. Pour a hot coffee and it cools down to room temperature. It never spontaneously gets hotter by pulling warmth out of the cool air around it. A warm room and a cold room, open to each other, always even out in the middle. Hot flows to cold. This is one of the deepest rules in all of physics, the second law of thermodynamics, and it only ever runs one way. Heat rolls downhill. Now look at the problem your AC is facing. On a hot day, your room might be a pleasant 22 or 23 degrees, while outside it's baking, 35, 40 degrees or more. Your air conditioner has to take heat out of the cooler room and shove it into the hotter outdoors. That is pushing heat uphill, against its natural direction, from cold toward hot. And nature does not let you do that for free. To move heat the wrong way, you have to do work. You have to spend energy. And that is exactly why your air conditioner has to be plugged in, and why it has a hard working part at its very heart called a compressor. The electricity isn't there to make cold. There's no cold to make. It's there to pay the toll for pushing heat uphill. So how does the machine actually grab hold of heat and carry it? It uses a special fluid called a refrigerant. Think of the refrigerant as a courier, a delivery driver that never quits. It runs forever around a sealed loop of tubing, in through your house, out to the yard, and back. It picks up heat inside, drives it outside, drops it off, and comes back empty to do it all again, thousands of times an hour. And one key thing, that refrigerant is sealed inside the loop. It never touches the air in your room, and it never gets used up. If someone ever tells you your system is low on refrigerant, that doesn't mean you burned through it like petrol. It means you've sprung a leak. So we've got our courier and we've got its route. Let's follow it around the loop one stop at a time, starting with the moment it steals the heat right out of your living room. Stop 1 is the indoor coil. In the trade, it's called the evaporator, and in a moment, you'll see why that name is perfect. Tucked inside your indoor unit is a coil of tubing, and flowing through it is our refrigerant, arriving here cold. Really cold, only a few degrees above freezing, far colder than the air in your room. A fan blows your warm room air across this cold coil, and now the second law does its thing automatically. Heat flows from the warmer air into the colder refrigerant, downhill, for free. The air comes out the other side with its heat stripped away, and that is the cool air pouring from your vents. But here's the beautiful part. where that heat actually goes. As the room's heat pours into the refrigerant, it doesn't just gently warm it up. It makes the refrigerant boil. It turns from a liquid into a gas right there in the coil. And boiling is the secret weapon, because boiling something absorbs an enormous amount of heat, far, far more than simply warming it does. You already know this from your own body. When you're hot, you sweat. And as that sweat evaporates off your skin, turns from liquid into vapor, it carries heat away and leaves you feeling cooler. A wet towel on your neck feels cold for exactly the same reason. That heat-guzzling power of turning liquid into gas has a name: the latent heat of vaporization. And your air conditioner is using the very same trick as your own sweat, just on purpose, with a fluid built for it. So that's stop one. The refrigerant boiled, and in boiling, it drank up your room's heat. But now it's a warm gas, carrying all that heat around inside it. Heat we somehow have to get rid of, outside, in air that is hotter than the refrigerant. And you already know the rule: heat won't flow into something hotter on its own. So how do we force it to? That is the compressor's job, and it's a genuinely clever move.
Stop 2 is the compressor, the part that uses most of your AC's electricity, sitting out in the outdoor unit. Our refrigerant arrives here as a cool, low-pressure gas, loaded up with the heat it grabbed from your room. And we've hit a wall. We want to dump that heat into the outdoor air, but the outdoor air is hot, hotter than our refrigerant. Heat won't flow from the cooler refrigerant into the hotter air. It's stuck. Uphill, remember, is never free. So here's the fix, and it is wonderfully simple. The compressor takes that gas and squeezes it hard, crushing it into a much smaller, high-pressure space. And when you squeeze a gas, it gets hot. You have felt this yourself. Pump up a bike tire and the pump gets warm in your hand. That warmth is the same physics. Compress a gas and its temperature shoots up. The compressor squeezes our refrigerant so much that it goes from merely warm to genuinely hot, hotter than the summer air outside, easily hotter than a fresh cup of coffee. And that changes everything. A moment ago, the heat was trapped. Now that the refrigerant is hotter than the outdoor air, the downhill direction points outside. The heat is ready to flow out into the yard, all on its own again. So notice what the compressor is really for. It does not make the heat. The heat came from your room. What it does is lift that heat's temperature high enough that downhill now points outdoors. It's the uphill pump at the very heart of the machine, and paying its electricity bill is the price of moving heat the wrong way. So now we have a hot, high-pressure gas, primed and ready to let go of its heat, which takes us to the coil outside, the place where your living room's heat finally leaves the building.
Stop 3 is the outdoor coil, properly called the condenser. Our refrigerant arrives as that hot, high-pressure gas straight from the compressor. It flows into a big coil of tubing in the outdoor unit, and a fan blows outside air across it. And because the compressor made the refrigerant hotter than the outdoor air, the heat now does exactly what heat loves to do. It flows downhill, out of the refrigerant and into the passing air. The fan sweeps it up and away into the sky. This is the moment. This is where the heat that was sitting in your living room a few seconds ago finally leaves your home for good. And it's why the air blowing off your outdoor box is warm. Most people assume that's just the machine's exhaust, like a car's tailpipe. It isn't. That warm breeze is your home's heat, gathered from every room, carried out here, and released. If you could tag one packet of heat with a bright color and watch it, this is where you'd see it drift off the coil and vanish into the summer air. Now, as the refrigerant lets go of all that heat, something happens to it in return. It cools just enough to change back from a gas into a liquid. It condenses. That's why this coil is called the condenser. And notice the lovely symmetry. Inside your house, it boiled, drinking heat in. Out here, it condenses, pouring that same heat back out. Boil to absorb, condense to release. That's the two-step at the core of the whole cycle. So our courier has done its job, picked up heat inside, dropped it off outside. But there's a catch. It's now a warm, high-pressure liquid, and to grab more heat from your room, it needs to become that ice-cold liquid again. It has to reset, and the way it resets is maybe the single cleverest trick in the entire machine. Stop 4 is the reset, and to understand it, I have to let you in on the one secret that makes this whole machine possible. We keep saying the same refrigerant boils when it's cold inside your house and then runs blazing hot outside. And you might be wondering, how can one single fluid boil at a freezing temperature in one place and be scorching hot in another? Here's the answer, and it is the key to everything. The temperature at which something boils is not fixed. It depends on pressure. Take plain water. At sea level, it boils at 100 degrees Celsius, but carry a pot up a tall mountain where the air pressure is lower, and it will boil at more like 90 or even less. That's why cooking takes longer up high. Now go the other way. Seal that water in a pressure cooker, cranking the pressure way up, and it won't boil until well past 100. Same water, wildly different boiling points, and the only thing that changed was the pressure. So here's the rule that runs your whole air conditioner. Lower the pressure and things boil colder. Raise the pressure and they run hotter. That's the master key. And modern refrigerants are chosen because they are astonishingly eager to boil in the first place. Out in the open at normal air pressure, one of these fluids would boil at around minus 50 degrees Celsius. That's roughly minus 58 Fahrenheit, colder than your kitchen freezer. That eagerness is exactly why, on the low pressure side of the loop, the indoor coil can sit just a few degrees above freezing and happily sip heat out of already cool room air. And it's why once the compressor cranks the pressure up, the refrigerant turns fiercely hot. So, back to our reset. Right now, our refrigerant is a warm, high-pressure liquid, and we need it cold again. The last part of the loop is called the expansion valve, and it's basically a tiny, tiny nozzle, a pinhole. The refrigerant gets forced through that pinhole, and the instant it squeezes out the low-pressure side, its pressure suddenly drops. And you know the rule now. Drop the pressure, and the temperature crashes down with it. The refrigerant flashes into a cold, low-pressure mist, freezing cold once more, ready to flow straight back into the indoor coil and start soaking up your room's heat all over again. The loop is closed. Round and round it goes. Boil cold inside, squeeze it hot, dump the heat outdoors, drop the pressure, boil cold again. 2 pressure changers, the compressor and the valve, keeping our career ice cold on the inside of your house and piping hot on the outside. That's the whole machine.
Now that you can see the whole loop, let me show you the payoff. The single most surprising number in this entire story. Because the machine moves heat instead of making it, it is astonishingly efficient in a way that at first sounds like it's breaking the rules. Think about a simple electric heater, a toaster, a space heater, an electric kettle. You put in 1 unit of electricity and you get out 1 unit of heat. That's a fair trade, and it's also a hard ceiling. When you make heat directly from electricity, 1 unit in gets you 1 unit out, and you can never, ever do better than that. 1-to-1 is the very best any heat maker can possibly do. Now here's your air conditioner, or its winter twin, the heat pump. For every 1 unit of electricity you feed it, it delivers 3, sometimes 4 units of heat moved. 3 or 4 out of 1. It looks like you're getting more energy out than you put in, like free energy. But you're not, and this is the whole point of the video. The machine isn't making that heat, it's only moving it. And moving heat is far, far cheaper than making it. The electricity isn't being turned into heat, it's just paying the compressor to shuttle heat that already exists from one side to the other. Here's the way to feel it. Making heat is like buying bottled water. You pay full price for every single drop. Moving heat is like pumping water up from a well that's already on your land. You're not paying for the water, you're only paying the little bit of electricity to run the pump. That's how 1 unit of power can move 3 or 4 units of heat. Engineers have a name for this score. They call it the coefficient of performance, and for a typical home system, it lands somewhere around 3 to 4. A plain electric heater is stuck at 1. And this is the real reason you'll hear people talk about heat pumps as the future of heating homes. A machine that moves heat can warm your house for roughly a third or even a quarter of the energy of one that makes heat. Same elegant trick as your AC, just pointed the other way, which is exactly where we're going next.
Here's the part that quietly rearranges how you see your whole home. Everything we just followed, boil to absorb the heat, squeeze it hot, condense to dump it, drop the pressure to reset, that exact loop isn't only in your air conditioner. Walk into your kitchen. Your refrigerator is the very same machine. It pulls heat out of the food compartment using a cold boiling coil inside and dumps that heat out into your kitchen through coils on its back or underneath. Reach behind your fridge sometime. It's warm back there. That warmth is the heat being pulled out of your food and dropped into the room. A fridge is really just a tiny air conditioner, cooling one very small, very well-insulated box. And this, by the way, is why leaving the fridge door open to cool your kitchen on a hot day does absolutely nothing useful. The fridge just dumps the heat straight back into the same room it took it from, plus a little extra from its own motor. Open the door and you're not cooling the kitchen. You're very slightly warming it. An air conditioner only cools your room because its hot half is outside. That outdoor box isn't optional decoration. It's the entire point of the machine. Now for the real twist. Take an air conditioner and add just one extra part, a clever little switch called a reversing valve, and you can flip the whole loop's direction. Run it backwards, and the indoor coil and the outdoor coil simply swap jobs. Now the machine pulls heat out of the cold outdoor air and pumps it into your house. So in summer, it cools you. In winter, you flip the valve and the very same box heats you. That machine has a name. It's called a heat pump, and you might be realizing it isn't really a different device at all. It's an air conditioner running in reverse. And here's the mind bender that ties it all together. Even freezing winter air still has plenty of heat in it. Cold as it feels on your face, it's still far, far above the true bottom, absolute zero, down around minus 273 degrees. There is still heat in that cold air to grab, and a heat pump grabs it and moves it indoors. 3 or 4 units for every one it spends. So your air conditioner, your refrigerator, and the machine keeping homes warm this winter are not 3 separate inventions. They're one, the same beautiful loop, just pointed in different directions. So let's replay the whole thing, now that you can actually see inside it. Warm air from your room blows across a cold indoor coil, where the refrigerant boils and drinks up the heat. The compressor squeezes that gas until it's hotter than the air outside. Out of the condenser, the heat pours off into the yard, and the refrigerant condenses back into a liquid. The expansion valve drops its pressure, it turns freezing cold again, and it loops straight back for more. Round and round, quietly carrying your home's heat outdoors, thousands of times an hour. And with that whole picture in your head, watch how easily the everyday myths fall apart. My AC makes cold air. No, there's no cold to make. It removes heat and carries it outside. Cold gas gets blown into my room. No, the refrigerant is sealed in its loop and never touches your air. Your own room air just gets its heat stripped off as it passes a cold coil. If I crank the thermostat all the way down to 16, it'll blow colder air and cool faster. No, the air comes out the same temperature either way. A lower setting just makes the machine run longer, not colder. And a heat pump and an air conditioner are totally different machines. No, they're the same machine. One just has a valve so it can run the loop both ways. Every one of those myths dissolves the instant you stop thinking cold maker and start thinking heat mover. And this quiet little heat shuttle does a huge amount of work in the world. As of the most recent national numbers from 2020, air conditioning uses around 19% of all the electricity in American homes, close to a fifth of the total. The machines keep getting more efficient too. As of 2026, new air conditioners sold in the United States have to clear minimum efficiency ratings. You'll see the scale called SEER 2 on the label, and the exact minimum depends on which part of the country you live in. There's also a quieter change happening inside them.
The industry is phasing out an older refrigerant known as R410A in favor of newer blends like R32 and R454B that are far gentler on the climate if they ever leak. As of 2025, new home systems in the US are being built with these newer refrigerants. End quiet change. But whatever those specifics happen to be when you're watching, the physics underneath never changes. It has been the same elegant loop for decades, and it'll be the same loop for decades more. You cannot make cold, so the machine moves heat instead. And because moving beats making, it does it 3 or 4 times over. So next time you walk past that outdoor box and feel that warm breeze rolling off the top, you'll know exactly what you're feeling. It's not exhaust. That's the heat from your living room, carried outside and set down in the yard, one packet at a time. If you enjoyed pulling this apart, subscribe and stick around, because next time we're cracking open something completely different. How AI image generators actually conjure a picture out of what starts as pure random noise, a process called diffusion. Same curiosity, brand new machine. No hype, no doom. Just how it works. See you in the next one.